Hello and welcome to the Invisible Cabaret podcast. I'm Ferrero Rochelle.
And I'm Rosie Verbose. Back in pre-corona times, we began Invisible Cabaret, a variety entertainment troupe devoted to stripping away stigma surrounding mental health. We performed in venues across London and were looking forward to our first small tour of the UK.
Sadly, the pandemic had other ideas.
So we adapted our mission to form the Invisible Cabaret podcast. We talk to all sorts of artists about what creativity means for their mental health, thus making the invisible visible. See what we did there?
Please note, we at Invisible Cabaret are not mental health professionals. If you're affected by any of the issues raised in this programme or are struggling with your mental health in any way, we've made a list of resources for you on our website, www.invisiblecabaret.org/podcast/resources.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to the Invisible Cabaret podcast. We bring you somebody different every time, and this time we are delighted to welcome our first illustrator. We've had musicians, we've had burlesquers, now we are venturing into paper and pen and iPad even. Ooh.
Yes, today we're welcoming the wonderful Elyssa Rider. Woo!
Hi.
Welcome, Elyssa.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
Well, thank you for being here.
Elyssa, how has lockdown been for you? Tell us. Let's kick this off with what everyone wants to know, because that's what everyone is experiencing and we're all in this together.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a mixed bag. I tell you, honestly, when it first began, I felt like I was in a dream and I just kept being like, am I real? Am I real? Is this real? Am I real? Because I'm an extrovert, so the sudden lack of people was really hard for me. And also I'm someone who's quite tactile. I do like a hug. I do like a cuddle. And I basically got really touch-starved. For about a month, I didn't have a hug. And then I snuck off to the park to have a secret hug. But obviously don't tell the government. But it was the best hug of potentially my life. It felt amazing.
It's so wholesome.
It was about 2 minutes long. Our whole bodies were like pressed against each other. I was like, oh my gosh, I love it. It was
when
lovely.
the first lockdown lifted and, you were encouraged to go out a bit more, my parents came to visit and they said exactly the same thing. They were like, we're going to be hugging because it's been 6 months, 5 months or whatever it was back then. And I met them at the train station and my dad was like, those kind of hugs where they hold the back of your head.
Oh, I love those hugs. Oh,
That's so sweet.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, a god tier hug.
I still haven't hugged my parents. At all.
Oh my God.
Well, I'm kind of lying because I put a bin bag over my head and body and let my mum hug me from the outside, but it wasn't really the same and it felt a bit suffocating.
That doesn't sound like a comforting hug.
It wasn't a god tier hug as you have just described this one, no.
Who knew?
Do you know what? It really changes that dynamic. So
almost a little bit like you're being kidnapped or something,
I mean,
surely.
a great fear of mine as a child. So, traumatic all round.
Oh, dearie me.
But I haven't hugged my dad at all. And it's,
Oh.
it's nearly, we'll be coming on for a year soon, I suppose.
What a weird time to be alive. So that's part of the mixed bag, obviously the touch starvation.
Yeah. Touch starvation's still a lot. And I was thinking, I kept being like, oh, you know what? I've experienced unemployment for vast swathes of time, 6 months here, 6 months there. There was a lot of me getting up every day and having no job. And so I've experienced this before. And I was like, oh, this is old hat, mate. I can do this. But when I reflect, I was crying every day during lockdown. So maybe I was struggling. There was a lot of stuff going on with protesting and with stepping up to be vocal around racism. And this is kind of my bag anyway. I do this. But the intensity with which that was happening and on a really global scale, I think also really was having an impact on me. And I live in a house of all people of colour, and specifically everyone else in my house is a black person. And so there was that was happening and really was affecting my housemates. And they were, it's not really my place to say how things were here, but things were affecting people in my household.
Of course. Of course.
Of course. And it was really hard. Everything was really hard. And I got furloughed for a month and then I got brought back quite quickly, actually.
Okay.
And I've been working ever since as well. But I'm 4 days a week in Brook, and then 1 day a week I illustrate. So freelance life and also charity worker life.
Yeah, that's a mix, isn't it?
Isn't it a mix? It's not a lucrative mix, but it's a mix.
That's it, isn't it? It might not be something that gets you a lot of financial, financial benefits. The stuff it must be doing for in
The
here.
old soul. Yeah. I do feel fulfilled by my work.
That's amazing.
It's a nice feeling.
I'm glad that you're still doing the hustle with the illustration as well, because you know, you are so not only so gifted, but you've obviously worked so hard, and like it's very clearly a passion. Do you find there are benefits to your creative side in terms of your mental health? How does that dynamic work for you generally?
Oh, massively. Massively. I find that, well, I don't know, maybe that's unfair to me. I was going to say, I love talking about myself. I just love attention. But that makes it sound like I'm like massively egotistical. I might be, but actually I think I'm just being quite honest about how people are. We love talking about ourselves. I love talking about myself to people. I love hearing about them as well. It's not that I don't love listening. I do love listening. Illustration is a really lovely way to kind of make it all about me. And just be like, I want to talk about this thought that I've been having this week, which is this revelation or this reflection or this thing that's making me really angry or this really difficult to phrase concept, which is a bit abstract, so I'll draw it or I'll make a comic about it, or it doesn't quite warrant a conversation, but I want to explore that, so I will explore that this way. Illustration allows me that because it doesn't need to have an audience. The audience can just be me. It can just be the process. It can just be that I put it down and I'm like, great, well, I got that out. Or I can do what I often do, which is I put it on the internet. I put it on Instagram. And the really nice thing about making work about mental health and then putting it online is that anyone can find it and be like, oh yeah, I have that. And that brings me endless joy. People messaging me basically being like, me too, yeah, I have that. Or I have that, but in this way. Or, wow, thank you so much for putting that online. I didn't realise that I also experienced this. And you phrasing it like that or you putting it out there has made me realise that this is something that I experience. I really, really like that. I think when I was writing to you beforehand, before the conversation, I said something about being quite shameless. And I mean that in the most positive way, in that I kind of refuse to feel shame for stuff. And I kind of feel that, I think my sister once phrased it like, oh my gosh, I'm going to come across as so romantic. Oh gosh, how annoying. Okay, sorry. Just take whatever I'm about to say with a pinch of salt. And if it makes you cringe, then I beg your pardon. But she basically said to me once that I live as if I live in the world which I want to live in. Okay, that was not very articulately put. Let me try again.
I get it though.
Do you get what I mean? So I will behave in a way, I will act in a way that I want to, as if the world is the way that I want it to be. So if it's like progressed to a point where I'm able to do that, and it would be safe for me to do that, I act as if it is that already. And as a part of that, I feel that I have a responsibility with my illustration every time I create content to be content that will help to be a part of the world as I would love it to be. So
what it reminds me of, I think it's so admirable, but I know of people who would say that it's foolish to live that way.
Because it's unsafe.
Yeah, because it's unsafe. The example that comes to mind, sadly, is being told as young women that we shouldn't go out walking late at night on our own. We should have we should have a support group. We should walk with a friend. We should walk with a boy. We should do something along those lines, because it's sad that we live in this world, but we live in a world that's unsafe.
Right.
Yeah.
And we
And
need
don't
to
wear that because
don't wear
you
that.
might invite this. And
Exactly. So we need to protect ourselves because this world is the way it is. But instead you're saying that, you're living in the world as you want it to be. As it ought to be. Exactly.
Right. But that doesn't get rid of the harm, and it doesn't get rid of the danger. And so I do just get harmed, actually, which is the really sad reality. But I kind of, I just, when someone's done something wrong and you're a kid and you tell the teacher and you're like, such and such did this to me. And the teacher's like, well, let's just move you over here, or let's just do this differently, or let's mitigate the harm by making you change. It just is so unjust.
Yeah.
It makes me so angry. And I always feel like it should not be me who has to be the one to change. It should not be me who has to be the one to alter their behaviour. I will continue to stick my neck out and be like, no, my work should be like this, and I want to be able to wear this, and I want to be able to behave like this, and you can just jolly well catch up.
Yes, I love that.
That's my manifesto. There we go. My art, I try and be aware of the responsibility I have. So making work that continually represents white blonde girls, which was what, I was raised consuming in terms of media, in terms of art, in terms of TV show, whatever. I basically flat out refuse to draw white blonde girls, which is my I have a new girlfriend and she is a white blonde girl. And I know.
I love that.
So I won't draw her, which feels really mean. But also, like, I can't.
No Titanic moments for you guys.
maybe just like, I mean, I could draw her. I just can't put it on my Instagram because I feel like by drawing something which just affirms what is already the status quo, what is already the standard for Eurocentric standards of beauty, like what I'm saying to all my followers who are not that is, you're not good, or you're not okay, or you're not acceptable, or you're not aspirational, or you're not attractive, or you're not, all of these things that I grew up thinking about myself because of I wasn't seeing myself represented. I realised that my own work becomes content, becomes fodder with which to oppress people, unless I am directly like contradicting that and directly opposing that. So I'm very sorry to my lovely girlfriend who I will not draw, but I cannot draw her for Instagram.
I'm sure she will understand, given the, the stakes are that high. Are you kind of saying, Elyssa, that your art is a way of, you want to do the action and make the difference, preferably without causing massive harm to yourself, don't you? So
yeah,
is art a way of doing that for you?
Yeah, I mean, that makes it sound a lot more noble than it is, because I think we do need to circle back to the fact that I said that I love talking about myself, because ultimately that is a big factor. I would hope that if I'm making content or if I'm making art, that I'm contributing in a positive way rather than adding to negative things.
This seems to be a theme that is running through the most recent episodes of our podcast.
Really?
This idea of using art, using creativity to process or get through or understand something that makes them feel unsafe in a safe way. In a way that doesn't...
Very therapy, isn't it?
Very therapy.
Very therapy.
Speaking of therapy, we would love to talk to you about your experiences of therapy, because you are currently going through EMDR. Is that correct?
I am.
Would you mind explaining what EMDR is?
I absolutely can.
And would you mind talking about your experiences?
I definitely could. I keep accidentally calling it EDM, which is very different.
Very different.
I always, it just slips out. I'm not a big EDM fan, personally. And I keep being like, I've got to go, I've got EDM.
People are like, oh. in this current climate?
So EMDR, it stands for... good question.
Eye movement, desensitization, and...
Reprocessing. Very good knowledge. So actually, you probably know about it already, but just in case there are people who don't know about it, it is a form of therapy which is a bit freaky, I would probably describe it as, just in terms of, you know about talking therapy, you know about CBT, you know, you expect like lying on the sofa and talking to your therapist when you imagine therapy. EMDR is not that. EMDR is thinking of a traumatic memory, reconjuring it so that you become distressed and potentially triggered again, bringing you back to that space. And then doing what I call the brownie promise. So my therapist, we do it over Zoom because I've started this therapy during COVID. She holds up her fingers and a little brownie promise close to her face like this. And then she does a full arm extension and comes back to the face, back, forth, really, really quickly. And she tells me to follow her fingers with my eyes. And so my eyes are going left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And that process forces the brain to stimulate the left side, the right side, the left side, the right side, which in turn processes that memory which has got stuck. So, sorry, I should have preceded this by saying EMDR is a form of therapy used for people who experience post-traumatic stress syndrome or PTSD. But basically PTSD is where my kind of layperson's understanding is where you have experienced trauma, potentially something happened during that trauma where you couldn't fulfill the fight or flight response that your body was going into. So you're traumatized, you're experiencing something horrific, your body goes into fight or flight, and then maybe your body's like, run, but there's something which prevents you from running, or something else happens, which means that that memory, as it's happening, gets stuck and it doesn't process correctly. You basically are like a record that is stuck. What EMDR does is it brings it back up, triggers all the kind of automatic nervous system stuff in your body, and then you force it to be processed, which is difficult. You know, if we're talking about traumatic memories, something that may have caused you to have PTSD, that could be something that's very difficult for you to do, and maybe that's something that you're not ready to do, and that's okay. But I will say, boy, does it work. Oh my gosh. The reason I sought it was because my Instagram followers told me to. Like, that's one nice thing about Instagram. I have a breadth of information that I wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. People's experience. It's great. The way that it works with me is my counsellor asked me kind of, can you rate your distress level on a scale of 1 to 10? And I'll say, 10. And I'll be like streaming with tears and nearly inconsolable. And then she'll be like, okay, hold this memory, and it'll be a memory that we've discussed together. Hold that in your mind. And then think of your negative cognition. And by that, she always asked me, what did this memory make you believe about yourself? What negative cognition did it make you believe about yourself? And that is a question that no one has ever asked me before. And it took me a really long time to figure these cognitions out because it wasn't really something I'd ever considered. So I was saying stuff like, you know, all men are dangerous and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, no. What did it make you believe about yourself? And that was something that I hadn't distinguished before. So actually the root of these things are other things. For example, like I feel trapped is probably one of the less triggering things I could offer here. And so she'll get me to hold the memory, hold the cognition, and then she'll do the brownie promise back and forth. And then she'll check in how I'm doing, what's coming up. And what's really interesting is that the brain does its own thing. And EMDR is actually not that well understood from what the research I've done. Like, people don't fully understand why it works. Like, we get why it works, but like, why does it work? We don't really know.
Yeah.
And so interesting stuff will come up and I'll mention it. And my counsellor will be like, okay, go with that. And if this is a type of therapy, if this sounds appealing to you, I would say the more you give to it and the more you lean into it and the more you are like, this is weird, but I'm not going to think about how weird it is. I'm just going to do it. the more you get out of it. And I find the memory gets big holes in it. I won't be able to see it clearly. It will go blurry and it'll be more and more difficult to imagine. And my distress level will go from a 10 to a 0.
Wow.
Which is incredible. And I have since had like 2 occasions where I definitely would have and should have been triggered if I hadn't had this therapy. And I wasn't. And I was like, oh my gosh, it worked. It's amazing.
That's incredible.
How does this make you feel, Rochelle? Because your dad does this kind of therapy.
He does. And I find it very, very interesting. It also links back up with all the things he's kind of told me about trauma, about PTSD, about processing that. My dad's always used the analogy of like a laundry cupboard, so like an airing cupboard. And trauma in PTSD is like a lot of sheets have been shoved into this airing cupboard, unfolded. And every time you open it, they all fall down in your face and they smother you and you can't, and you're fighting to get out, and it's really, really traumatic. So to get over it, you just shove them all back in and close the door again. But every time you need to open that airing cupboard, which you will do, every time you open it, the sheets just keep falling. So EMDR and processing trauma is about allowing those sheets to fall down so that you can fold them up one by one and put them in neatly, so that the next time you open that airing cupboard, it's not that difficult and it's not that traumatic.
Wow. I like that analogy.
Yeah. So that just, covers that entirely, doesn't it?
Really
That's
does.
exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Isn't it that the eye movement is to replicate what REM, like eye movement is, or REM cycle sleep stuff? So the processing that you'd hopefully do overnight, but as you say, just hasn't been done. And it's amazing hearing you talk about it. And I can't wait to see. I mean, are you going to draw about it?
Yes. So I've done one comic. I've started this comic, which is like me and PTSD. Basically, my idea was, this is so great, everyone needs to do it. So I realised that people haven't heard of it. And I also realised that people don't recognise PTSD in themselves. And I also recognise that people are scared of things that they don't understand and know. So I thought if I just put a really comprehensive and plain speaking comic together, then people might be able to see that they have PTSD and go get therapy. And that we could all process together and move forward with our lives.
That's a life vision, isn't it? Wonderful. Before we wrap up, how on earth do you keep your energy up for having really exhausting therapy and, dealing with the stuff that's going on in your own brain? Do you have a very good self-care regime? What's your secret? How do you do it?
What's my secret? My secret is actually I'm falling apart.
Okay.
Just like mass burnout, baby. I definitely feel really burnt out. I think that the COVID period is testing us all to our limits. And it kind of reminds me of other times in my life where I've had an ongoing difficult situation, which just removes like a good wad of my capacity. And you don't necessarily notice it's always there, but it is. It's always there and you're always reduced. And you don't always think about it, but actually you're much quicker to fill up. You're much quicker to reach your limit. You're much quicker to anger, much quicker to cry, because there is this constant stressor. And so that is COVID, which is, we're all experiencing that. We're all going through that same thing. But I think because of that, I burnt out. I burnt out with Instagram. I had like 2 months off. I don't think I had not posted twice a week for like 3 or 4 years. I've been posting twice a week.
Yeah, you were like clockwork, weren't you, for ever such a long time? And you were doing not just the illustration, but you were doing your regular story updates, which often would be your catcalling diary, like street harassment diary. Like that must have been totally exhausting. Very worthwhile, but so expensive for you.
It is. I actually don't do the catcall diary that often. Because it's very difficult for me to not lapse into like total despair around how unsafe I am if I do the catcall diary a lot, because one thing I haven't really explored that much is my hypervisibility as a mixed race, East Asian and white woman. I need to look into it more. When I've tried to look for research on it, I've not really found a lot. I've definitely not found much about East Asian women. I think there's a lot of stuff about us having invisibility, but not as much about hypervisibility. I don't know what it is about me or my appearance, but the way I get catcalled, man, wow, it is a lot. And the reason that the Catcall Diary kind of spawned into existence was because there was just this disbelief about what my experience was from other people. And it was almost as like a body of evidence being like, look, it's really bad. Which isn't necessarily the most positive thing for that to be born of.
No.
Very understandable,
right?
though.
I kind of just wanted to be like, it's bad, yo. Like, look at this.
Yeah, someone believe me, for God's sake, you know?
Right. So I'm not doing that as much. And the thing that has basically changed, the thing that I've really had to start interrogating during COVID is my addiction to productivity, my like anxiety around being a productive human, beneficial to capitalism, and winning those capitalist awards for valuing, like contributing value to society. That has been a big thing over COVID, and being like, I wonder if this might be perhaps not true. I wonder if perhaps this might be harming me in some way. How obscene.
I'm not giggling at the concept for listeners. I'm giggling at Alyssa's delivery, because it's like that meme, you know, the holding the butterfly one, where it's like, is this
From Sailor
harming
Moon.
me?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
That's what I was
Absolutely.
seeing.
Is this harming me? For sure. Yeah, and I was like, I seem to feel really bad about myself when I don't produce something in the day. Isn't that an interesting revelation? Yeah, capitalism, yeah, and addiction to productivity, and just being really shackled by Instagram and feeling like I owed people things, and feeling like my value came from likes and from visibility and from, you know, people, all of this needing people to be like, oh yeah, well done, really like your art this week, you know, well done, I liked it. And it's like, you just never know what people are going to like on Instagram. You do something, you spend hours on it, and they're like, we hate it. And it's like, oh, for goodness sakes.
And that we hate it could very much be, I mean, it might be the case, but it also might be a perceived just because it's gone to 30 likes instead of 60 or whatever the number is that you're used to, you know?
Instagram buried it because the algorithm, you know, I'm not selling anything for Instagram, and they want me to sell things, and I'm not buying their advertising. And so therefore everything gets buried. And people I'm friends with who have massive followerships have been telling me for years, it's not about how many followers you have. It's not about how many likes you have. You can have tons and still be sad and still feel like your work isn't worth anything, or feel like you didn't get the validation that you wanted in order to feel valuable. And I mean, I've always listened, but it kind of feels like during COVID, maybe it's sunk in, or maybe I snapped. One of the two. But I basically was just like, I just can't do this. I'm just done. Like, it doesn't serve me to only make art for others. It doesn't serve me to be caught up with likes. It doesn't serve me to feel indebted to this time pressure. Because who actually cares? Like, who is checking? Who's being like, oh, I didn't see, Elyssa didn't post this Monday and this Friday. I didn't see her do that. She's falling behind. She's behind schedule. I'm going to not follow her. Like, okay, so what?
Yeah, and if they are, and they do,
it still doesn't affect me.
yeah, does it matter?
No, because let me be real with you. Is my illustration paying my bills? No.
No.
I got a tax rebate last year, honey, because it makes me no money.
Yeah.
So does it actually, I just had a good talking to myself basically, and I was like, is this paying my rent? Will this mean that I cannot live if I don't post? No.
But so now, are you making art more for you?
Yeah. And I only make it when I want to.
See, that's a good thing.
I used to push myself. I would regularly work until 2 a.m. I like do a full day of work, start other work, and then just work until 2 a.m. and get stuff done. And I'd say I was working 4 days a week and then 1 day in illustration. Was I? I was working evenings and weekends. Like, come on. So now when I start to feel myself lag, or I start to be like, oh, it's a bit boring, I don't really like this, I'm like, all right, you don't have to do it. And I just stop.
Yes! Here for that.
Yeah. And I just post when I jolly well want to. People on Instagram will tolerate it, you know?
Yeah, they can jolly well catch up, can't they?
Yes, they can.
Yeah.
Are you a creative who's loving this episode so far and wondering how you can be a guest in the future? Contact us on invisiblecabaret@gmail.com to shimmy yourself into an interview slot. Or if you'd just like to share what you're grateful for this week, or next week, or any week in particular, you can hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, contact us via email, or record a little snippet of yourself using the Anchor app. Links will be in the description below. Happy listening! We've come to that point in our podcast where we'd love to talk to you for another 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. But we really should wrap up. And we'd like to know what you're grateful for this week. So please, Elyssa, kick us off. Tell us what you're grateful for this week.
Mine's a bit sappy, I'm afraid. But
No, we love sap.
Oh, you love sap? Oh, great.
Love
I've
it.
got it. I'm very grateful for my girlfriend, who is very good at mental health and is incredibly supportive, incredibly understanding, incredibly compassionate, and just a really positive person as well. Just good understanding.
That's a good package
She
right
is.
there.
She's great. She's very good with the old mental health. And yeah, she's just very on side. Yeah, very grateful.
Love that. That's what we all need, is somebody on the side.
Too right.
Yeah, may we all have someone on side.
Rosie Verbose, what are you grateful for this week?
This week I am grateful for singing. And I'll tell you for why. So I have this last month I've been doing half an hour live stream on a Sunday of me singing just like jazzy stuff, because this year 2020 was supposed to be the year I started actually gigging as a freelance singer, musician person. Funny story. 2020 happened and then I didn't. So the alternative to that has been me just singing on my own in the room. And then I realised that I could actually have some kind of benefit from doing a bit of a live stream, but a very chilled, like I'm still in my jumper and pajamas type situation. So it's not the full vintage situation. It's a smaller, more cozy type of thing.
Very on brand for Invisible Cabaret. Very on brand.
Yeah, totally. And it's meant that I have actually practiced. I've actually heard my voice get a bit better. I feel a bit more in control of my voice. And you know what? As we're always saying about catharsis and creativity, it's one of the things at the moment where even when my brain won't do the writing and the stuff that I love to do and is what I would consider to be my main thing, when I sing, something in me relaxes and is at peace. So I am very grateful to have that experience and to be making a bit more time for it.
Lovely.
Love that. That's so lovely.
Yeah, that is lovely.
What about you, Ferrero Rochelle?
Oh, mine is quite a small one this week. I'm grateful for my lunch break. I'm grateful for my lunch break. I have a new job. I've mentioned this in the last 5 episodes, and have a lunch break, and sometimes it's quite a short one and sometimes it's quite a long one. It doesn't matter what the length is. It's just an opportunity for me to take a short break. Today I did like an oven baked salmon dish, and
Wow.
I know.
Hello.
And I walked to my
Yeah.
local coffee shop, which I've mentioned that I'm grateful for before, and had a chai latte and just really just decompressed. And it just makes me so peppy to go back to work. So then the last few hours of work just fly by. So I'm very grateful for my lunch break.
That's a lovely thing to be grateful for. It sounds like you're really optimising that time as well, if I
Well,
may
it's
say.
interesting because I have mentioned before I've had an incredibly busy few weeks, and I should be using those 2 hours, hour and a half, whatever, to do my washing or to, I don't know, tidy my room or clean, to be an adult, basically, to clean the bathroom.
Ugh.
But I know, so dull. But I'm telling myself that is the only window I get to just be for a little bit. Do it. It's a break for a reason. So use it as a break. And I was beating myself up to begin with, and now I've just accepted it. And now I come home, my housemate's working from home, and the two of us will sit down, have our lunch together and watch Catfish. So...
Yes, Catfish!
So...
That is really... And also just have a moment, because I don't think when we first met you would have done that.
I don't think I would have either.
I'm not linking that with our meeting. I'm just linking that with the
it's
journey
all
you've been
to
on.
me.
Let's bring it back to me, shall we? No, that's a huge little moment. That right
I
there.
think so. So yeah.
Oh, nice.
Actually taking a break. Maybe that's what I'm grateful for. Actually taking a break. Listening to my body. Etc. etc.
Love that. Such a good
Marvellous.
example.
So once again, we've been absolutely inundated with audience participation this week. So thank you so much. It's really lovely to hear from so many of you about what you're grateful for. We'll begin with someone who's written in and requested to be anonymous. So that is always an option. If you are interested in sending in something you're grateful for, you don't have to have your name. That's absolutely fine. And they've said... they are grateful for their husband and daughter and wouldn't have survived lockdown and all this isolation without them. We've also heard from the lovely Bollydits Dolly, who said that she's grateful that she started speaking therapy. It's been another good aid for lockdown, I bet. We've also heard from Lauren, and Lauren said that she's grateful for her health, her partner, and her dogs. Right, I'm also very grateful for dogs. We've had a contribution from the lovely Curly Chaos, who was featured in our last episode, and she said she's grateful to have a safe space. And lastly, we have the lovely Ida Sanguine, who said she's grateful to have such a loving support system. Lots of people grateful this week to have people around them to love on them and support them and be there for them. I think something we can all agree with. Thank you so much, Elyssa, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure for me.
Before you go, do you have anything that you'd like to plug? Anything that you want to give a shout out to? It doesn't have to be your own work. It could be anything you like.
Can I ask a question? Last year, you made some fantastic queer Christmas cards.
I did.
Are there any leftovers? Are you doing any more of that kind of thing?
I would love to do queer Christmas cards again this year. I think I might not maybe do as many designs. Maybe I'd do something like 2 designs. But yeah, I think I'm feeling super gay this year, and I think that it's in order, you know? I need to create the content that I want to see in the world.
Yes.
And that's gay Christmas cards, yo. So, got to do that.
Anyway, regardless of what you decide to do, where can people find you on the interwebs if they want to have a look at your stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not making any promises that there'll be anything on there ever again, but it's at Elyssa_Rider, which is spelled ELYSSA_RIDER. And that is my Instagram. Don't bother with me on Twitter. Like, I have one, but just don't bother.
Fair play.
Do you know what I mean?
We appreciate an honest queen. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you could write me an email if you wanted, but I, also wouldn't bother. Just Instagram.
You are quite a salesperson today. It's so ridiculous.
I know. I'm like, you could hire me for extra work. I have joked about being broke, but also, just don't bother. I'm taking a break.
And what about Brooke, Elyssa?
Brooke have an Instagram. I don't know it off by heart.
We can put it in the link.
It's like Brooke Sex Positive, but I just don't know if there are any like underscores or things like that. But definitely follow Brooke online. We've got lots of cool stuff going on there. Actually, do you know who I might promote? Is my friend and former colleague, Ruby Rare, who has got a book coming out. And I don't actually know if it's already out, but it's her first sex education, sexual pleasure, sex information book, and it will, I haven't read it yet, but I know it will be fantastic because she used to be my manager and my colleague, and I learnt a lot from her, and she really knows her stuff. So yeah, go buy her book. There you go.
Ruby Rare.
Ruby Rare.
Marvellous. I'll look out for it. And those links will all be in the description, along with some resources for the classic, if you've been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, the resources will be in the description. So do have a look at those too. Thank you guys for joining us. And we will see you not next week, but the week after for more Invisible Cabaret podcasty chat. Until then, be kind to yourselves. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
This has been the Invisible Cabaret podcast, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do be sure to share it with a friend and let us know that you've enjoyed it on one of our many socials. We're passionate about stripping away stigma with as many people as possible, and hearing feedback about the things that you and your friends have enjoyed listening to brings us nothing but joy. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Just search Invisible Cabaret.